Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and let's rattle off the setup for this video real quick. This is the American Linebacker Mech from Warlord games, and one of the plastic kits from the new edition of Konflikt 47. Since I've been hearing over and over that this is a really nice kit, that people are impressed by the quality and the build process of, I'm really looking forward to it. Now, I've already built the Axis Vogelspinner, and I really liked that kit, even if the legs aren't quite as posable as I'd like. So, can the Linebacker be even better? Let's find out. I always show the instructions in my videos, even though it's available on konflikt47.com, because websites don't last forever, alas. The sprues are really well put together. None of the parts are particularly fragile, like that one piece on the Vogelspinner. There's a bunch of weapon options, and there is a fair bit of posability, but we'll come back to that later in the video. There's even a clear canopy, and I think this is the first wargaming kit that I've had with a clear part, although I have had car model parts with headlights, and obviously display plane model kits also have kind of canopies like this in the same way. Now, there's one thing that I do find fairly odd and that I'm not convinced about. Several times during this build, there are mirrored components, a left side and a right side, that have the same number. Whilst building, I always worked out which way around these were supposed to go, but if you're not paying attention, it would be very easy to pick up one part because it has the right number, and then glue it into the wrong place because it's the mirrored version of the part you needed. I won't be pointing out these as I go along, as we be here all day, because there's quite a few of them. Just be aware that any of these kind of duplicate numbered pieces might actually be directional, and so you should pay attention to which way around they go. To begin with, there's the main body of the mech, and it's really got some 1950s stealth bomber vibes going on, really cool. The two body pieces fit together well. There's a little bit of play in the keying, so do make sure that it all lines up as the glue sets. There's a second half for each of the two repulsor lift cowlings on the back, and they go into place nicely, and then a little air intake kind of vent thing, which has a recess that's perfectly shaped for it, and so kind of slots into place very well. There are several panel pieces then that go on the outside of the vehicle, maintaining surface detail where the main piece is at the wrong angle in the mould. But these don't necessarily have to fit perfectly, rather they're their own distinct detail on the model, and that makes mould lines and seams really not much of an issue. It's a very well designed kit in that regard. For the underside of the nose, there's a panel with rivet. Great to see rivets moulded separately like this so that they don't end up oddly shaped. There's also a rounded armoured nose that goes around the front. These separate panels also include the repulsor pieces for the underside of the cowlings, and one of my favourite pieces, this stack of pipes. And I know I'm going to hate myself for saying that, and I'm going to hate this part when it comes to painting it, but they look really cool at the moment. There's also a single repulsor on the side of the body, possibly a manoeuvring repulsor, I guess. The front of the cockpit has the nose weapon mount, which I really should have kept off for the moment because I want to make it modular, but I will come back to that later in the video. The canopy of the cockpit is where things get interesting, because the top cover piece of the body that sits in between the repulsor cowlings forms a hinge for the canopy to open with, and that is now a usable hinge, which is cool. You can keep the canopy unglued so that you can open and close it even after it's painted, and that's cool. The interior of the cockpit has the pilot's body, and there's two head options, but I'm not going to install this just yet. I will get back to this essentially at the very end of the video because I have a plan. It's a cool little modification for this model, but again, I'll get back to that at the end of the video. For the front, there's also some headlights and mounting blocks for the headlights. They do have a grille on the front to protect the glass, and they can rotate, so you should be mindful about which way you want these to be oriented. I chose to have them kind of at 90 degrees flat and upright rather than diagonal, but so long as you choose which way to put them in, you'll be fine. Completing the repulsor suite, there's an extra panel, kind of like a brick, that joins together and then goes into a mount onto the body. And would you look at that? the entire body is made from the first sprue. The only exception is the nose weapons, which, sorry to sound like a broken record, I will return to later in this video. For now, the legs. Starting at the hips, this piece is made of 2 halves and has 3 ball mounts, 1 for each leg and 1 for the waist. This makes the linebacker pretty nicely posable, but I'm just hoping for a little bit more. The hips piece also has some panels, an armor panel for the front, and at the back is what I will be referring to as a fart vent. Oddly, we then go on to the middle part of the leg, and the 2 halves of this clamp over the end of a piston. And there's some rivets, panels that will go on here as well. Now this attachment forms a hinge to ensure that the movement of this piston is really good, which is great. A nice little movable hinge. Would you look at that? It's great. It moves so well. You do have to be careful to put the piston in the correct way around, and it's only reversible because they made it such a nice hinge. It's such a good hinge. Do you think I'm kind of overstating this? The outer part of the hip then goes directly above this, and then one of our familiar panels covers the seam nicely, and that has some rivets moulded on at the nice angle. Then, when you put this together, the top part of the outer hip and the middle part of the leg, the entire mechanism completely locks up with no movement. I was livid when I put this together. What's the point of having this really nice hinge if you've just glued it all up and it locks together and there's no posability? To distract myself from my immense rage, I built the feet, which are extremely strange and I'm not a fan. There are 3 pads along the back for each foot. The middle is 2 pieces and then the sides are 1 piece each that just glue on, and they do have a correct way round, so do pay attention to the orientation of them. And there's also a couple of panels that go on the sides to cover the features based on how these parts were moulded. Good design again. This block is effectively the ankle, but has some wiring gubbins that go on the underneath, and they'll never be seen. I'm not sure why they're here, but they are here. I'm certain that this, once again, this could be hinged, but it isn't, just like the knee is not properly posable. There are then 2 unnecessarily complex and tiny parts that stick together, and then they go onto the front of the ankle piece, and the scalloped front surfaces here are where the toe hooks go. Now the toes have a little bump on the outer side of each of them, which means there is a kind of left and right for each foot, but the scalloped cut means they can be posed up and down. And that's it, that's the legs. Again, all of these parts are from the second sprue, except for the hips, which is 1 line in the 3rd sprue. All laid out really sensibly, really easy to find what you're looking for. So before I go into the 3rd sprue and get stuck into the arms, I'm going to have a little bit of a break because I need to put the legs together properly. And I'm not going to be following the instructions, but rather I'm doing a little custom work. And this is exactly why I haven't joined all of the legs pieces together so far. And I'm going to take my anger out on this knee hinge. Now I have a plan, and I've had this plan all along, but I'm just going to lead you by the nose through the steps and just tell you how it looks at the end. Now, given the way that the knee joint works, or doesn't work, I think it would actually be trivial to just shorten one of the 2 bars and glue it together, because the hinge will then be at a different angle. Pistons like this can also be lengthened, but you just need to find a round section of material to fill the gap that you would make. Now I can't tell if either of them are supposed to be movable pistons, kind of which way around it's meant to be, so I just chose to shorten the one that would be easier to hide the mess on afterwards. I stripped the locating peg and very carefully slipped it flush away from the hip block, and then I cut that in half, which may have been a little bit too much, but I made it work in the end. Gluing the piston that I didn't adjust first, and then placing the shortened piece of pipe with glue on each side, I closed the hinge, and it doesn't quite fit because I cut away too much of that middle piston. Don't worry though, because I shaved around all of these pieces until it did fit, which also actually gave me an extra glue contact surface, so it's going to be really solid once it's set. And as you can see, I've brought this joint in so much so that the foot will be raised up away from the ground. You may have also noticed in the background that I have some of the terrain from the Konflikt 47 starter set right here, and that's what I want the foot to be raised up on. At first I wanted to use the larger wall sections with the foot in the window, and that would have looked awesome with the idea I had in mind, but unfortunately that was just too big for the 80mm base the model comes with, and I really didn't want to make it any bigger than that. So I just accepted that I'm going to be using the shorter, smaller wall pieces, beveled the joining edges, and I used the corner cover cut down from one of the taller wall sections. I also placed in a section of broken wooden flooring, which kind of ends up being a little bit liminal, as the floor height implies there is a basement below, but there is no basement below because that's where the base is. Don't look too closely, it's just a base for a mini, it's fine, don't worry about it. I started positioning as many of the vast number of leg pieces as I could, so that I had less joints moving while I was trying to pose it. The left leg was quickly glued up, and that has the unmodified knee and is going to stand upright. And then the left leg got bit by bit pushed into place until I had it lined up. I smushed down some milliput, rolled it with a cobblestone texture, and that's going to mean this matches my bolt action American forces. And here's another trick, because I put another piece of milliput underneath where the left foot will go. And I put a bit of plastic film over that and pressed the foot down into it. And once that's cured and I can peel the plastic away, that's going to have an imprint of the foot and be a really good solid connection for gluing. Here is yet another sprue, another one, really. Another kit that's not the Linebacker, yes, this time the enemy, the Axis Stahltruppen, which have a zillion spare parts, spare legs and spare arms and other things, and so I took out a few to compare. I spent forever positioning and repositioning the Stahltruppen bits before spushing it all up with some air drying clay, which is cheaper than milliput but doesn't hold texture. This will be fine, as I'll be making this into a rubble pile later anyway, bringing all the pieces of the base together. As you can see, I spent a whole long while adjusting this, and I'm not going to bore you with any more than I already have in this video, but I'll show a trick to help with the mess that I made when using air drying clay. Take a scrappy brush, dip it in your paint water, and just brush off any of the clay that you don't want to be there. It will dissolve away and wash down, and it might even clump in the corners, acting as gap fill. But this way you can preserve a lot of detail that you would otherwise lose hidden under the clay. Once I had all of that laid out how I wanted it to, I put the toes on the right foot, clamping down over the wall section. Right, that is the detour over. Let's get back to the model in this video, the Linebacker. And we have the arms to do. The shoulder, as will seem all too familiar by now, is two pieces clipped together and has a panel that covers the front with rivets moulded on in the correct angle. These front panels are one of those with the same number but are directional, has a left and a right. And the way to tell which one goes where is the locating pegs on the inside. Two are slightly larger and two are smaller, and there are corresponding slots on the shoulder with two larger and two smaller holes. The upper part of the elbow is then made in two pieces. Even though it's smaller than any of the other pieces, it is keyed so it can't rotate. But this would be a very easy thing to modify if you wanted to rotate it. The lower part of the elbow has to be slid into place and has a wide range of motion, but has to be glued into place. It's still not an action figure. The main piece I think should go on the inside, as it has no detail, because on the outside there is a cover for the joint with rivets on. Now I would recommend that you do not glue this just yet until you've worked out where you want your posing to be. Now I've already worked it out, so I'm going to just glue this down. The forearm is a huge block made of two parts with an extra panel for rivets. They really stuck with this idea throughout this kit, and it's a good idea, so I approve. This then goes onto the elbow joint and can rotate again, so posing is your own fault. From this point, we're going to deviate from the left and right arms as the weapons will be different. And for me, I'm going to put the Tesla cannon on my left arm. The ammo canister battery thing has to be assembled first, and that has to go in the correct way around, so all the parts will overlap in an odd way. For some reason, there is a gap in the side of the gun piece, and so you'll need this smaller drum piece to fill that gap. I recommend using lots of cement on both sides of this, because that will fuse the whole thing into a solid block. There are some side brackets that are positioned on each side, just in front of that drum, and these are another dual numbered piece that are actually symmetrical. There's a ridge on one edge, and there's an absence of a ridge on another. I chose to put the gaps on the uppermost edge against the weapon's body. I think that's correct. Also mirrored numbered parts are these kind of vent things, and I wasn't 100% sure which way was correct. I just went with having them slightly lower. They might go the other way around. I don't think it matters too much. I should have let these dry because I kept smashing them about when I was forcing the other pieces into place in the next few steps. The ammo battery piece can then attach to the back, and then the entire weapon attaches to the underside of the forearm. Now, it hangs weirdly far back, which makes a lot of sense from a balance point of view, but my brain just wants it to be further forwards for some reason. Now, I started to pose the pieces of my left arm, and you'll notice a figure standing here. Well, it's time for another detour. This is the US Firefly sprue from the new Konflikt 47 starter set, and most importantly, this is part of my plan for this model. Now, you see, I really love a dynamic combat pose, and I especially love those confident, serene poses. But recently, I've been thinking more about casual non-combat poses, and I've had in my mind a scene for one of my racing jet bikes, but that scene is actually now going to play out on top of the Linebacker instead. The vehicle is parked, and the driver has gotten out and is doing something mundane, eating lunch, reading a letter from the girl back home, listening to music, whatever it might be. Now, I tried using the Linebacker pilot head on the Firefly body, but yeah, the scaling's a little off here, so it's fine. I'm just going to use one of the Firefly heads. That's the true scale vehicle versus hero scale infantry thing going on. I picked out a specific set of legs that make it seem like he's just casually leaning against the body of the vehicle, standing on its arm, not bothered about being 5 meters up in the air. It is the 1940s after all, health and safety hasn't been invented yet. And technically, the pilot actually forms a nice strengthening join between the body and the arm, as it's all plastic and it's now one solid piece together. Alright, so back to the Linebacker, and we're getting up close to the final stretch, although there's actually quite a bit more to do, so stick with it. You see, people keep going on about me about magnets this and magnets that, and I think magnets are a passing fad. They do have their uses, but people are trying to use them for far more things than they are useful for. But this is one of those times when magnets might actually make sense. So, magnets. So these two plates first are the mounting points for all of the secondary weapons that I'll be placing on the right arm. And there are 3 such options. By gluing a magnet in place onto the back of each of these panels, I can then mag each of the weapons and switch between them. Weirdly, I managed to put these in opposite polarities, and that is actually perfect for this build, as all of the left and right weapons will stick together in pairs. Now, I had to heavily carve out the vents on the forearm to make these fit, but the plate actually completely covers that venting, so it's not really much of a drama. The Super Bazooka first was easy to magnetize as it's a hollow piece, just kind of 2 halves. I laid it in place over the magnet on the arm, and then dropped a dot of super glue and then the magnet in, which instantly set itself to the right position, the right polarity, attracted itself to the first magnet, and so I just didn't have to worry about that. Then there's a Venturi cone on the back, and the Super Bazookas are complete. The autocannons are similarly easy to mag, with a side panel for the weapon's body, so that I can do the same trick laying a dot of super glue and then the magnet in place, attracted in the right orientation. And then there's an ammo clip on the top of that. Finally, the heavy machine guns, which have a belt box that goes on the side, but for the magnet I actually had to have it exposed as the heavy machine gun bodies are just too small and I didn't want to drill them out. But once these are painted, this is just going to look like another connection point. Moving on to the nose weapon, and there's two options here, and so I drilled out the front to place yet another magnet in here. I glued another into the back of the twin medium machine gun, which is a single component, and another into the flamethrower, which is two, the nozzle itself and a heat shield. This time I used plastic film, similar to how I'd separated the feet from the clay, to ensure that each magnet glued into its respective part in the right polarity, so that I could then switch between the weapons. Now, one final modification. Are you sticking with me? As I've got the pilot standing on the arm of the mech reading the letter from home, I obviously need to remove the body of the pilot from the cockpit. Now this could be a very delicate process, and so I took it very slowly, bit by bit, cutting it out and doing it right so that I didn't accidentally cut any part that I didn't want to. I started by using a drill and drilling kind of the biggest chunks out of place, and then I carefully shaved and sanded bit by bit, including taking the pilot's finger off of the dashboard, which was quite scary to do, because if I slipped there, that would definitely damage something I wanted to keep. But this left a big gap, and so I rooted through my bits box for something that would look like a chair back, and eventually I found this toy motorcycle to sacrifice. Now these few pieces take a little while to sort them out, and whilst I have rushed through it in the video, I took a long time being careful to make sure they looked right once they were all glued together. The kit as intended is a fairly large model kit with 3 sprues filled with pieces, but my modifications to the base, the joints, the posing, the weapons and the pilot, I've added quite a bit of extra work to this kit. But I was told this is a good kit and everyone loved it. But do I? Yeah, I really do. The way the pieces go together, the native posability plus the little conversion work, the overall style, it's just a great kit all around. I will say that when I first saw the parade ground standing to attention, boring pose that Warlord Games insist on using for all of their walkers on the website, makes the linebacker look so unappealing. But now, with the pose I've designed, the little story for the pilot, I'm really happy with how this came out. Now, I do have to rip it apart again so that I can paint it, and that will happen eventually, probably, someday. Well, until then, let me know in the comments what you think of my video showing this entire long process. Hopefully you've enjoyed, or at least come along for the ride if you also have the kit. For now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.